I walked into a stranger's house along with the police officers. There was my ex-husband John on the floor and a young woman lying beside him. No blood, no traces of a fight. Just leftover food on plates, an open pack of my limited edition vitamins nearby, and 2 dead bodies. My name is Sally. I am a well-known fitness coach. I own a sports club, sell workout clothing, and vitamins. John is my husband and lawyer with whom we have been married for 15 years and we're supposed to get divorced officially in a week. Why? Because Johnny was always cheating on me. Although I only found out about it recently. We were about to face a long and stressful property division process. We met each other being poor students and a wedding contract didn't make any sense to us back then. Now that our wealth is somewhat millions of dollars, we do have enough to fight over. That's exactly what the detective was after. He started from afar. He asked me about the last time I saw my husband and how Cynthia, the one he was found dead with, came into his life. And then he got down to the point. He asked me how much money I'd get out of court now that my husband was dead. The thing is, no matter how dishonest John was in our relationship, I couldn't murder him. That was exactly what I told the detective, but he didn't take my words with much credibility and stunned me by the fact that I was one of the prime suspects in John and Cynthia's murder. At that moment, I realized that I needed to get to the bottom of this story myself, because it was the only way to clear my name and avoid going to jail. My first thought was that Cynthia's husband, Charlie, could be the murderer. After all, she was married when she met my hubby. Since Cynthia was an employee of Joe's company, he kept all her information in his office. I went to his office, found the murdered woman's home address, and headed over to meet her husband. On my way out, I spotted Joe's tablet in his chair. Tried a few times to enter the password, but failed. The password was wrong. I decided to take the tablet with me, though. I really needed to try to access his messengers. Perhaps somewhere in the correspondences, I'll get an answer to the question of who exactly wished him dead. Charlie didn't open the door for quite a while. When he finally let me in, he looked crushed, and his eyes were watery with tears. There was an unpacked suitcase in the middle of the living room. Charlie went on to explain that he'd just gotten back from a business trip a few hours ago. He hasn't had the nerve to take care of things since he found out about the murder. And now he was about to leave for questioning at the police station. Was he really out of town? And does it even matter? He could have planted those poisoned vitamins in Cynthia's jar far in advance. I asked Charlie about where he traveled and where he stayed. And as I drove to my fitness club, I managed to verify this information. The facts matched. However, this was not yet the proof that the betrayed man was completely uninvolved. Meanwhile, local TV had already broadcast a number of stories about the high-profile murder. Everyone in the health club was glued to the screen. The footage showed John and Cynthia's bodies, the house where they were found, and the jar with vitamins. In one of the shots, the cameraman took a close-up of the lid of the jar, and I saw a number on it. It was a 7. How could I possibly forget? All of our limited edition jars are numbered. We only made 50 of them to see how they'd sell. And I have the name of each of the customers in my reports. I opened the file immediately. The customer was a woman I never knew. The number 7 jar went to the Carmel town 60 miles from here. 7. Joe's password is 10 characters, 3 sevens followed by the numbers 1 through 7. 3 sevens is his lucky number. How could I forget that? It's been after him his whole life. These numbers were on his license plate, his date of birth, the address of the first office he rented. I entered the password and immediately got the list of messages in one of his messengers. I found their chat with Charlie. This resentful husband wrote to his wife's lover, "I would kill you for ruining my family." I looked at my watch. Charlie's in the middle of an interrogation. There's no point in wasting time. I better go to Carmel. And on the way back, I'll stop by Charlie's place under the pretense that we're both in the same boat and I want to support him. That way I'll get to ask him a lot and get to see what he's like. With these thoughts in mind, I went to meet a woman who lives in Carmel and ordered the number 7 jar from my store. The small town greeted me with a heavy downpour. The place I arrived in Carmel turned out to be an old, small house surrounded by an unattended garden. I walked around it a few times. I could clearly see the car's wheel marks in the yard and the dirt path stretching past the street. I called to the owners, ringing and knocking on the door, but there was no one inside. Meanwhile, a neighbor came out to me and introduced herself as Lucy. I explained to her that I sold vitamins and would like to meet the woman who had ordered them. Lucy got surprised. She told me that there was no woman living in the house. It had been rented by a single man for almost 6 months. I started asking about him, and Lucy described a man who seemed all too familiar to me. Then I showed her the picture of John, and she immediately recognized him and called him by name, Joe. I tried to hide my nervousness and shock at her words. I asked how long he had been gone. Lucy's answer stunned me. Just an hour ago. This seemed crazy. I saw John dead with my own eyes, and now I hear that he's alive. I decided to wait for the tenant to return, so I got into my car, parked across the street. I wanted to see him with my own eyes and make sure I wasn't crazy. A few hours later, the harsh light of a car's headlights blinded me for a moment. When my vision restored, I saw a man's silhouette leaning over by the car. Then the man entered the garage, took out a jack, and started dismounting a tire. I decided to go out to him, and when I got a little closer, I was sure it was John. But none of it made sense to me. I saw his dead body. I saw the forensics team carrying him away, and there he was, standing in front of me, but not in the clean-cut business suit I'm used to seeing him in. He's wearing an old t-shirt and jeans, the kind of clothes he'd always hated. I was trembling with fear, but I took courage and called my husband's name. He turned back sharply, looked me in the eye, pulled a gun from under his t-shirt, and fired. I ran to my car, hearing a few more loud gunshots behind me. I felt my heart leaping with stress and adrenaline. I hit the gas and drove home. Lucky for me that he had taken the tire off, and I had at least a head start if he decided to chase after me. All the way I kept thinking about how my John was a traitor, a fraud who faked his own death, and a thief who also tried to kill me. But why would he do all that? I couldn't make sense of the logic behind it. When I got home, the first thing I wanted to do was call the cops. But what would I tell them? That the man they recorded dead this morning tried to kill me? They'd think I was crazy, and they'd probably be right. I was pulled out of my thoughts by the sound of brakes. A car parked in my front yard, the same one I'd seen in the yard in Carmel. John came out of it, and I trembled. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace and rushed up to the second floor. There in the bedroom, we had a police call button that John had installed after we got robbed. I hit it quickly and locked myself in the utility closet. I could hear John chopping down the front door of the house with an axe like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. I just prayed the cops would get here in time. He's already on his way up to the second floor. I hear his footsteps, a gunshot, another one, and a sharp pain in my arm. And then I felt something warm running down my arm. It was my blood. He hit me in the shoulder. I got dizzy, and then I heard another gunshot and the police shouting for John to drop his gun. The closet door shuddered as he threw his back against it. I pulled the handle hard, ran out, and hit John over the head with the poker. He lost consciousness, and I screamed to the cops not to shoot me. When John came to consciousness, he answered the police's questions, said his name was Joseph, and he's my John's twin brother, which my husband never mentioned. After their parents died, my John had been drinking heavily, and one day he was driving drunk in his brother's car and got into an accident that left 4 people dead. He ditched the car and lied to the police that his brother was driving. So Joseph ended up in prison for 20 years. When he got out, he called John, but instead of repenting, John told his brother to never show up again. On top of that, he stole from his brother, sold the house, the cars, the whole inheritance. So Joseph felt the urge to retaliate. He became obsessed with my husband, turned into a real stalker who knew everything about our lives. The divorce, the division of assets, and Cynthia, who John left me for. So Joseph hatched this plan in his mind. He decided to poison my husband and set me up. I would go to prison and Joseph would show up with proof that he was John's brother and get the inheritance. He ordered my vitamins for that very purpose. Yet he did not know that each bottle has a unique number under the cap. Joseph thought he would never be found. So he carelessly ordered a package to the address where he lived. He introduced himself to his neighbor Lucy by his real name, but shortened it to Joe. That's why the names matched when I talked to the woman in Carmel. Joseph sneaked into the house where my husband and his lover lived and poisoned dinner in the oven. He waited until John and Cynthia were dead, and then planted a jar of vitamins, replacing them with poison pills so that I would definitely go to jail for murder. It was all such a hard story to believe. The twin brother was so out for revenge that he murdered both his birth brother and his lover Cynthia. I could have been the third victim, but I was lucky to get away. Joe was sentenced to life in prison. I, in turn, was left with a scar on my shoulder, reminding me of this story about my husband and his twin. You may judge me, but it was Joseph who almost killed me, that I have forgiven. He wasn't all that bad a person, and his life would have been completely different if it hadn't been for my ex-husband's despicable behavior. That's why I go to see Joseph in prison every week. Never would I have thought there was a room for such a friendship in my life. However, never say never.